The British government wants to put a stop to smuggling networks and curb migration to Great Britain. And now the Senate in Rwanda has approved the deportation deal as well. That means the Senate in Rwanda has approved the deportation deal with the United Kingdom. This means that nothing stands in the way from the Rwandan side of the agreement that Great Britain can fly asylum seekers to the East African country, as the newspaper The New Times reported. In Great Britain, however, there is still debate about this. Most recently, the lower house rejected proposed changes from the higher chamber of parliament. A decision could be delayed until April. On December 5th and 23, the foreign ministers of both countries signed an agreement intended to revive the so-called Partnership for Migration and Economic Development. In November 23, the original project was declared unlawful by the British Supreme Court. Human rights organizations and the UN condemn the plans because those seeking protection will be forced to leave for Rwanda and have no chance of an asylum procedure in the United Kingdom. There is also increasing criticism in Great Britain because of the immense costs. The state regulatory authority NAO recently spoke of more than £600 million. The British government justifies the project by saying that it aims to put a stop to trafficking networks and curb migration to Great Britain. And given the problems with passing the law, the UK now wants to pay asylum seekers up to £3,000 for a voluntary move. Well, a vote of confidence looks different in any way. And also, when asked by a British Survey Institute who they would like to see at the head of their party, only 45% of Conservatives recently answered the name of their current Prime Minister, despite all those stunts, and that's Rishi Sunak. Not an inviolable starting point for the former hedge fund manager, who, according to all predictions, will have to lead the British Tories in a new election for the House of Commons this fall. In the background, the knives are already being sharpened within the party, with numerous hardliners preparing to succeed Sunak in the event of the expected major election defeat. Under the slogan "Stop the Boats," Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wants to finally be able to demonstrate success in deporting asylum seekers. So it's time for Sunak to be able to show success. But that didn't happen last week either. With a clear majority, the British upper house, the House of Lords, as I mentioned earlier, sent a bill back to the House of Commons with which Sunak finally wanted to celebrate a success in migration policy. The Prime Minister has this in mind in order to be able to shine in front of the electorate with particular toughness and to give his internal challenges a run for their money. It's about those government plans to get those people out of the country who usually arrive on the island in rubber dinghies across the English Channel and register there then as refugees. And this deal with Rwanda, which is supposed to accept the refugees to process their asylum applications, was concluded first in April 2022, but the implementation failed several times in court. And the new regulation is supposed to remedy this. Because the British Supreme Court is blocking deportation with the argument that Rwanda is not a safe third country, the government just wants to declare the East African country one by law. And the lower house has already approved this so-called Safety of Rwanda bill several times with a Conservative majority. However, the plan failed in the upper house, where a large number of representatives who were not clearly politically identifiable always cause surprises. According to the British Constitution, the unwritten one, the House of Lords can block or change laws passed by the House of Commons for up to 1 year. And the then Home Secretary Priti Patel and the Rwandan Foreign Minister Vincent Biruta had already negotiated the deal in 22, as I said. And in this specific case, it's about the latter. The Lords tabled a total of 10 amendments when they voted on the project last week and then sent the law back to the House of Commons for approval. However, on last Monday, the majority of Tory MPs there rejected the changes that would have made deportations more difficult, or much more difficult. And this marked the beginning of the so-called Parliamentary Pingpong. After such a rejection, the law goes back to the upper house. And that was called for voting again on Wednesday. And for this vote, the opposition Labour lords had again promised 5 amendments. The first one, which states that the new law must comply with international law, passed. This means it is back to the House of Commons, which will probably delete it again in a future session. And it could still be a long time before Sunak gets through with his proposal. And while Sunak is hoping for a boost in popularity on the day of the first deportations, Labour is trying to score points by pointing to the massively increased costs of the deal, which can only cover a small proportion of the 30,000 refugees arriving each year. The British government has promised its country counterpart in Kigali a total of £370 million for the agreement. And Rwanda is prepared to accept and care for several hundred people and carry out the asylum procedures. But Labour MP Neil Coyne recently calculated that it would cost the British government around £2 million to deport a single person. Is the minister aware that he can send 6 people into space with Virgin Galactic for less money? He asked. Well, in fact, according to BBC research, a space flight for 6 people currently costs £2.14 million. The government has so far not let the negative comparison give it any new ideas, but wants to stick to the Rwanda plan. They argue with a hoped-for deterrent for new entrants. The situation is similar with the heavily criticized accommodation of migrants on military bases, in student hostels or on ships converted into asylum homes. Here too, there is not only human rights criticism, but also financial criticism. The British Court of Auditors calculated on last Wednesday that these new forms of accommodation cost £46 million more than the previous accommodation in hotels. A first attempt to accommodate migrants on a former barge had to be ended in the summer after life-threatening Legionella was found there. The director of British Future points out that although the upcoming 2024 elections will not directly be viewed as an immigration election, it will still strongly include this aspect. In recent years, Britain has experienced significant changes in immigration flows and the political landscape. In particular, after the introduction of a post-Brexit immigration system, immigration numbers increased significantly due to both political decisions and random factors. Before the elections, the government is now aiming to reduce immigration numbers to unprecedented levels. The latest data from the Ipsos and British Future Immigration Attitudes Tracker shows that public satisfaction with the government on immigration is at a low of just 9%. This dissatisfaction is reflected in a record 69% of respondents saying they are dissatisfied with the government's immigration policy. Rishi Sunak is under more pressure than Keir Starmer on immigration. While Conservative voters see immigration as the 3rd most important issue, it's only 12th for potential Labour voters. And this discrepancy shows that political and media influences play a role in shaping opinions. The main voting issues of the population mainly include the economy, cost of living, and public services. Parties are fighting for trust on immigration issues, but it turns out that the toughness of a party's message does not necessarily translate into more support. A diverse mix of voters and parties along the spectrum from liberal to restrictive views shows that trust on immigration is spread across different political camps. While the Conservatives are committed to reducing immigration, Labour voters emphasize both the need for control and compassion in immigration policy. And Keir Starmer faces the challenge of leading a broad coalition of disaffected people and presenting an effective immigration strategy that takes both control and compassion into account. And the coming elections will show how political actors deal with those different expectations and different views of the electorate. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.